So the first topic under ophthalmology for USMLE is the anatomy of the eye. Now, if we take a look at the eye, we can separate it into two segments. One called the anterior segment, which is present from the start of the lens to the anterior aspect of the eye. The posterior segment is the part which is behind that, all the way to the origin of the optic nerve, the optic disc. Now, when we take a look at the eye, there are three major layers. The first is the fibrous layer, the outer fibrous layer. So it consists of two parts, the sclera and the cornea. The junction between these two, where this white part of the eye joins the window of the eye, the transparent part of the eye, which is the main refractive device, is called the limbus. You can see the limbus if you draw an eye like this. This part is the limbus. Next, surrounding the sclera is the conjunctiva. There's the palpebral conjunctiva. There's the bulbar conjunctiva, which if you are to take a look at the eyelid, if this is the outer aspect, inner to that we have the palpebral conjunctiva, and when it comes onto the surface of the eye, it becomes the bulbar conjunctiva. Next, the two chambers. Now, the ciliary body forms the iris. Just behind that, we have this portion which is in front of the lens, and this is where all this aqueous fluid is released into. So that region is called the posterior chamber. Then the anterior chamber is the part which is anterior to the pupil and posterior to the cornea. Next, let's talk about the vascular layer, the uvea. The uveal layer, it is made up of three regions: the iris, which forms the pupil, the aperture of the eye. Then we have the ciliary body. It is important for changing the shape of the lens, for the function of producing aqueous fluid, and for holding the lens in its place. Ciliary body and the choroid. So the choroid supplies, this region is the choroid, and it supplies nutrition to this area. So next we have the inner layer, the pigmented layer. It is called the retina. Now there are some special places in the retina, such as the macula, which has a high density of cones, which is essential for central vision. So in the middle of the macula, if this is the macula, we have the fovea. This is the location where you have the highest concentration of cones anywhere in the eye. So there's one more important thing. Blood vessels will be present below in the uveal layer, but they never cross into the fovea. So they tend to make a margin around it. Next, we have the optic nerve and the optic disc. So the optic disc is called the blind spot of the eye, while the fovea is present as a depression and is involved in central vision. So if you are to think of central vision, you can imagine it to be, let's describe what central and peripheral vision is. Peripheral vision is when you look at an object, you focus on that object using the central vision aspect of the eye, but the surrounding that you can see is the peripheral vision. So the fovea, let's say you're reading a book, the letters you see, all of those rays will come to the fovea, while the background, the surrounding of the book will be the peripheral vision. So the optic disc is also called the blind spot because there's no detection of light in this area, and this is where the optic nerve and the central retinal artery and vein originate from. They come into the eye. Next, let's take a look at the retina and the funduscopy. Now, when we take a look at this, we'll divide it into three parts. First, the macula and the fovea. Next, the retinal artery and vein and their branches. And next, we have the optic disc. So there's a mistake in this diagram, but the optic disc is this outer one, and this cup is this inner structure. Let's take a look at these individually. So the macula, like we said before, is involved in central vision. The fovea is in the middle of the macula. You can see that here. It is present as a lighter structure in the middle of the macula. Now the macula appears darker. Then we have the optic disc, and in the middle of it we have the optic cup. Now this optic cup is essential in the diagnosis of glaucoma. Glaucoma is a condition in which there's going to be a condition called cupping, in which this diameter will increase. So this diameter will increase, and that condition is called cupping. That is diagnostic of glaucoma. Next, we have the retinal arteries and veins. So I want to add one thing before we go into the diseases. If there is neovascularization means new blood vessels form. So if that happens, then these newly formed vessels, they are weak. They are not as strong as the normal vessels, and they can easily be damaged, leading to hemorrhage. So hemorrhage can lead to vision loss, damage to the retina and vision loss.